the Real Bad Dudes cast. We're doing Obscursome.
So we're doing the sequel to Cronenberg's The Fly.
Listen. Do you hear it? It's getting closer. Much closer. Don't be afraid. Be very, very afraid.
You could finish your father's work. You're as brilliant as he was.
Something odd is happening to me, and I don't know what it is.
The Fly 2.
Directed by the person who also did the visual effects of the first movie, Chris Wallace.
Wallace.
Oh, Wallace. Oops.
He got an Academy Award for that, too.
That's our special guest, Tom Sullivan.
Hello.
He worked on this really small film, The Evil Dead. Did the book and the dagger, the effects, right?
That's correct. Makeup, the gore, the stop motion finale, the clay animation I did with Bart Pierce.
Right.
What fun.
And I'm also with Wolfman.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
And General Lutz.
Good day.
So, Tom, what all did you do on the Fly 2, and how did you get hired and all that fun stuff?
I got a call from Carol Wallace. That was Chris's wife at the time, and they were looking for sculptors and people for some concept stuff, as well as assembling kind of parts of molds, from other films, Gremlins, and other things that Chris Wallace Industries had worked on. Because they were going to have there was talk of a scene for Fly 2 where there was a room of all the teleporter tests where they try to put animals through and they'd all horribly mutated. But they were going to have like a freezer full of these things. And so we came in and they had that. But I think the first thing we did was coming up with maquettes of possible Fly 2 creatures, what Eric Stoltz would morph into at the end.
Interesting. It just seems like it'd be so difficult trying to do a sequel to a movie with Jeff Goldblum in it and Cronenberg, but I think, I think obviously you guys nailed it. It was different enough, really creepy enough.
It's really gory, graphic, and really icky.
You're right. So I'm recommending, and I'd say it's a different recommendation. I'd say if you enjoy the first one, you're going to love this one. And if you consider yourself like a sci-fi or a horror fan, I mean, if you haven't seen the first one, you got to put it on your list and watch it. And I think this is a great follow-up, and this is definitely different enough to where they both stand on their own.
I also add in for those that love practical effects, it's really worth it just to see what the crews came up with there.
Right.
Because it's pre-digital, of course, and it's actually a good-sized film.
Right. Lots.
As for me, I do recommend the film as well. I've always been a big fan of both Fly 1 and 2. In fact, I've even seen the original from the 1950s. And
Sure.
A lot of those 80s remakes of old 50s movies generally kind of fall flat. The Fly was a fairly goofy concept of somebody running around with a fly head and turned it into something that was, I don't think it's actually really been rivaled even to this day. The practical effects they used on the Brundlefly still look positively amazing. I mean, I don't think CG could even come close to that.
No.
Yeah, that's Stefan Depew and this brilliant makeup artist. He worked on A History of Violence, another Cronenberg film, and many other things, just many other things. And the crew there was really amazing, a really talented group of people at Chris Wallace Industries. And I later got to one of the crew chiefs there, the supervisors, was John Berg, who had worked on Star Wars, the he co-animated the chess sequence on the Millennium Falcon, and then supervised the Hoth AT-AT battle thing, with all those those stop motion AT-ATs, and all that's just amazing to me. And so I got to meet him, and he's a fascinating guy. Just both had similar childhoods. A dad who didn't get us, but we saw King Kong at an early point, and it just flipped the switch and had to do that. And he did plenty of animation. In fact, John was working for Cascade, but down in L.A., and back when they were making the very first Green Giant commercials, and he's the Green Giant in one of them.
Wow.
When I've seen it on TV, it's
I
that's
remember
John,
those as a kid.
kind of his frame. But one of the very first live action, he's kind of like backlit and looming over the bean field.
That's what I remember, those commercials as a kid.
But but it was just a great time, and then also the crew when they weren't working on Fly 2, for other films, ILM was just down the road, just a couple miles away, and that was awesome.
Certainly sounds it. As for the Fly 2, when it comes to horror sequels, they're almost always horrible, or they're like 20, 30 years after the fact and have next to nothing to do with the original film. What the Fly 2 did, it takes place I think almost immediately after Fly 1, and actually continues with the characters and things of that nature. And on the surface, you would think that Fly 2 is going to just be, a basic monster mash kind of thing with different mutants wandering around, but it actually has a fairly intelligent plot. And as with Fly 1, pretty sympathetic characters all around. Eric Stoltz puts in a pretty good performance. Makes you wonder what he would have done in Back to the Future.
Which is funny because his name is Martin, so you just call him Martin McFly in this, I guess.
Martin McFly. He turns into Martin McFly.
Martin the Fly.
So overall, I of course recommend both films. I even recommend watching the original 50s version, if only just to see where it came from.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you need to. Cronenberg definitely put his spin on this. Mm-hmm. His idea of how technology and other things can mutate us and transform us and all kinds of ways. Scanners and all the bug things and the way television morphs us and what's that darn thing with James Woods? Oh gosh.
Oh my gosh, now I'm blanking. Videodrome?
Videodrome, that's it. Yeah.
I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that trip out scene where the dude's chest looks like a VCR thing and it's pulsating, wanting to put the tape in.
Yep. But so he's that. This is the Fly. His Fly film is just definitely his take on it. Tim Burton would have done his thing with it, and Cronenberg made his very original and disturbing stamp on it. And I like how Chris's thing still has Chris's sequel has a lot of invention in it. A lot of clever things going on, and good performances. Out of Little Martin and the kid, and everybody's good in it. Good tension.
It wasn't a carbon copy of the first movie. They sort of took similar plot beats and then they went off in no direction and made it something completely different. Wolfman, what are your non-spoiler thoughts on recommend or not?
It's an absolute recommend, and I'm in the same boot. What am I, Canadian? I'm in the same boat with everybody. What's all this about? No, seriously, I absolutely recommend this. The 80s was the golden year for horror movies for me, and I personally, they have tried to do a lot of remakes of original movies from the 50s, and there was only 2 movies that actually did it right. The first is obviously John Carpenter redoing The Thing, and the second was when Cronenberg did The Fly. And I was pretty skeptical about The Fly too, because of the same stigma about sequels and such, but I was pleasantly surprised. and all for the same reasons. I mean, Eric Stoltz is a very excellent actor. You know, it's the special effects are simply amazing. I mean, I'm a big fan of stop motion and claymation myself. And, you know, I grew up watching King Kong as well and The Lost World, and I love that sort of stuff. Jason and the Argonauts. You show me stuff like that, it just blows me away. And then when I saw The Thing, Cronenberg did the same thing, no pun intended, as The Thing, you know, where it modernized it, it made it relevant to that generation, and made it even more scarier.
Or the Blob
And
remake.
the cool thing, the Blob remake, yeah, I'd say so. But The Fly 2 was the only one that had the nerve to go forward with that, though. I mean, you didn't see The Thing 2, you didn't see The Blob 2, you had The Fly 2. And the cool thing about The Fly 2 is that it had the nerve to try to go, that's, you know, with the same story and the same universe that David Cronenberg put together. And if you can kind of hang with Cronenberg, I mean, that's a testament to itself. So this is a definite recommend. The actors did a fantastic job. The set pieces were fantastic. Music score was nice and jarring. It had tones of Cronenberg without having Cronenberg in it. So it's not like you were watching The Brood and you're going, oh, what am I watching? But you were able to enjoy it, and it was well paced, and everything was really, really good about it. I highly recommend it.
All right. Well, I guess we'll go into spoilers and kind of talk about the overall plot. In the beginning, there was not Gina Davis, because from what I heard, she was so terrified from that maggot birth scene. I've heard two different stories. One, that was the reason she didn't want to turn. Another was because it was a small role, so I don't know which exactly is true. But so yeah, it starts out, we get a Fly, the son of the character from the first movie.
The character in the first movie was Seth Brundle.
So yeah, we get the birth scene. It's all in like a grody cocoon thing, and unfortunately, Gina Davis' character doesn't survive, and then they rip open the cocoon, and it's a human baby, you know. And as the plot's going on, he's quickly growing and becoming super intelligent.
Growing at a rate about 5 times faster.
Right. Which makes some other things that happen later on in the film questionable, but we'll get to that soon. So yeah, as a kid, he's also escaping, sneaking out of nighttime. Befriends a golden retriever. Everyone in this film is an asshole to him. Like, these scientists are just dicks, which makes the payoff later on in the film, I guess, more, sad. But yeah, we just got kind of. It definitely follows the theme of other 80s movies where it's usually like scientists or corporations, and they're usually evil, trying to, doing evil science stuff.
Evil.
They are.
Because then later, they do an experiment on the dog and ends up mutating into this horrible creation. And then you think oh, they're gonna kill this poor dog, right? And it's just like, nope. That scene, holy moly, jeez. I mean, that was just sad.
The dog actually kind of reminded me of the what was it, a chimpanzee or something along those lines in the first movie.
Yeah.
I mean, the creature effects on these things, man. I mean, a lot of movies would ape this as time goes on.
Take him to the next level, yeah. Yeah. So then eventually he grows up into Eric Stoltz, even though he's 5 years old.
Yeah, he's restricted to the campus.
Right.
And his curiosity is driving him all over the place. So he's trying to, find out what is going on there. And he meets that Bartok guy, who is the evil corporate head.
Mm-hmm. And he sort of befriends him and tries to be, sort of like, he befriends him so he can eventually use him up later on.
Oh yeah, well to figure out why they can't get the teleporters working.
Right.
And I think you can apply his genius to that.
It's like, it's not hard. It's just have a biofilter. Star Trek does it all the time.
And then he meets Daphne, which it was Mel Brooks who suggested that she be hired for this film. Because I believe it was this film company that helped finance the sequel.
Brooks film.
Yeah.
No, that was Beth Logan, correct?
Yeah, it's the name of the character.
That was a character name.
Yeah, Beth Logan. And of course, well, she's a fairly okay love interest, but it's like, how's the logistics of this going to work? Since he is half fly after all.
Well, they haven't realized all that yet. He's just wondering why he's suddenly in his mid-20s, and plus the incident with the dog. But then, that's when they had the party, and then he found out that the dog from the previous experiment was still alive, and they had to euthanize it.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah, he euthanized.
Touching scene. Yeah.
Yeah, he euthanises it with chloroform. It's one of those things where Eric Stoltz really puts a lot of emotion into that, because that could have easily gone really, really cheesy, but thankfully it doesn't. Now, of course, there is the typical scene where you get the love interest and the main guy, and of course they have to fight, and they do this all the time in movies, and it just. I get why they do it, but eventually after the dog scene, they end up reconciling.
Yeah, they reconcile when they decide to get it on, and technically he's 5 years old. I'm just saying.
Well, he's that's only in human years. He's really 25 in fly years, which I guess makes sense.
So Your Honor,
did you also pick up that earlier in the film he's like, I don't sleep, and then right after that scene he falls asleep?
One thing that ended up happening that's kind of funny is in the 80s, the computers were practically magic back then. Like if you had a Commodore 64 back then, I guess you could just design a warp drive, because how he ends up getting the telepod, as they call them, to actually work is he programs the computer. Now remember, this is an 80s computer. We're talking about kilobytes of RAM. We're talking about megahertz of processing speed. He gets the computer to be creative when it analyzes living flesh. Now, how a 5 megahertz processor with 5K of RAM can do that, I'm not really sure. Maybe he just is a really efficient programmer. He's able to teleport like a kitten without it dying. But it's like, I can't get over. It's like, okay, wait a minute. You're running a Commodore 64 here, okay? And you're telling me that's powerful enough to do that.
Well, yeah, a kid hacked into NORAD using a computer that could barely run WordPad.
That's just scary.
In war games. And then, hell, drunk Richard Pryor managed to put together a computer that almost killed Superman.
So if a Commodore 64 can do that, imagine what computers can do today.
I know. Yeah, I'm still working on getting the internet to work properly on my computer.
I'm not sure we need the Fly 3.
That'd be kind of interesting.
They touched on everything pretty good with the Fly too.
Right. But then of course we get to we missed an important point of the film, even though it's kind of obvious, but still, the fact that it turns out that even though he was birthed human, he has sort of like fly genes that are like in a resting state, and that they've been lying to him. Yeah.
He does start transforming into Martin McFly.
Is anybody else watching this as we talk?
Watching this, no.
Because I started the film when the conversation began, and you guys are picking up details. Are you talking about scenes just as they're popping through? I've got it on like number one speed. So but it's, I like that how they got Jeff Goldblum shots, clips from the original film, things that he had done in his little video diaries that Martin can review in trying to figure out what's happening to him.
Right.
That was nice that they brought him back through the archive footage like that, because everybody loves Jeff Goldblum. And
sure, yeah.
This is the part of the movie. Go ahead.
And they connected it. It shows the connection. They remind you a couple of times that, this is what has happened. This is the legacy of all that. And it's not happening.
Yeah, but it does that wonderful job. It does that wonderful job of reminding you what happened without forcing it on you, like most sequels have a really bad problem with doing.
Yeah, this film
just enough to make you say
alone, actually.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. This is definitely. It could be a standalone movie if you've never seen the original, or if you've never seen the original one. But you could literally watch this one and not have to have seen the other ones. But if you have seen the other ones, you get the aha, there he is thing going on.
I think growing up, I think I ended up probably seeing The Fly 2 more on TV than the first one, now that I think about it.
Now, the nice thing about this part of the movie, though, this is when the magic starts happening. This is when special effects really start kicking in. And like I said, I love practical special effects, and I hate CGI because it looks terrible on film. I'm one of those believers that feel that they kind of hit the peak with the original Jurassic Park, and then they've gone downward since. But this is when the magic starts happening. After the kitten experiment works out perfectly, and that's when when Martin starts thinking about how he can cure the condition, and then he's got that whole conflict going on that if he swaps out his mutated genes for healthy genes, he's going to wind up turning whoever into the Fly. So they also had the good moral moment going on too, where he doesn't kind of want to be like his father at the end.
Right. But then, yeah, once the effects kick in, I mean, yeah, it's still great work done, especially when he becomes the Fly. Like the leg, like the scenes of the legs like moving down the hallways and stuff was really, 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 really well done.
I love the scene where he's on the couch at her lake location or whatever, and there's got this great blue light on him, and he's starting to like cocoon up with the webbing.
Yeah.
And it's really effective because you can tell he's on his way.
That made me think of Gremlins too, or when the Gremlins are cocooning, just the way it looked.
No,
I don't think Eric Stoltz ate after midnight, though.
When he turned into the cocoon, me and sculptor Howie Weed sculpted the cocoon. And I'm proud to say there's one nice shot where they do like a camera dolly around it, and that's my side that I did. But it was really learned a lot on that show, because you've got to sculpt things, but they've got to be moldable and fit all the design requirements, and yet you want to add some of your own stuff into it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, we come to the climactic ending, where he's transformed in the cocoon, and Bartok begins asking Beth for this password because just before Martin McFly,
Hey, don't forget that scene where they have the dog attack him and he pets the doggy, which is actually a very important scene because it shows that he is different than his father on the way the mutations happened. He still has more of a human consciousness. He's less sort of fly-like than in the first movie.
He basically becomes sort of like a more or less superhero by this point because he's like Flyman. He's the human fly, so he doesn't have to dye his underwear.
He's got the genius intellect. He doesn't need to sleep. He's got better reflexes than Spider-Man. So he's got all the benefits, but none of the drawbacks yet.
So we get like a spin-off where he's fighting crime by spitting acid in criminals' faces.
Hey, he's an anti-hero. It's just what you did in the 90s. Basically, he sets up a password for the telepod so that Bartok can't use them. And the whole climax of the film is Bartok's trying to get the password, and it's sort of like in a really cool scene, we see Martin McFly get out of the cocoon and just kind of kick the crap out of Bartok. I really like this part of the movie, actually. In fact, it almost pushes Fly 2 above Fly 1 in some respects because of how intelligently this was done. Since Marty McFly is able to still have some human intelligence, he actually gets Bartok to type in the password to open up the telepads, which it's the worst password ever. Like, President Scroob would be...
Dad.
Yeah, the password is 3 letters, DAD. And no one thought to guess that, It's just like...
Hey.
Well, it's not like that one stupid movie that we watched earlier, the Predator ripoff, where the nuclear warhead was asking sports questions.
Okay, yeah,
Who
that was
scored 4 touchdowns in a single game? At Polk High. Oh man.
Oh, Code Red, the Rubicon conspiracy.
Yep.
But yeah, this is where it's really.
Dad is just fine.
So at the end,
Bartok comeuppance for being such an asshole. All the scientists do, actually. He ends up essentially murdering all the scientists that were just terrible people.
But this, I think, is the best ending of it all, though, because what ends up happening...
Wait a second. We are skipping over the fact that the character that was in the first movie that returns in this one,
Well, they mention that one, because I want to talk about the ending, because I really love this part.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So what you got is Marty McFly tosses Bartok into one of the goes to the teleporter with Bartok, and he's fully restored to humanity, and Bartok gets the perfect comeuppance. He gets turned into like this nasty looking creature,
Right.
and at the end of it, and you know what's kind of funny? Batman Beyond would actually go and sort of homage this with a character. I'm not going to spoil that one though, but basically he's this basic sack of gelatin that can't even hardly do anything, and he notices a fly at the end. It just kind of tortures him. And it's perfect. It's perfect. It's a very happy
poetic justice.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It reflects the dog sequence earlier, where the dog comes out and has to, it's all tortured and hated. Now, I've got a story about this, because at the end, they asked everybody in the shop at CWI if they had an idea for an ending, and they kind of set things up, how do you get back at Bartok or whatever. And I had the idea that that Martin would find a spider and, force Bartok into the telepod and leave a spider in there. And spider fly. And then have him go through it.
That would have been a homage to the original one with Vincent Price.
Right. Yeah.
There was an alternate ending to Fly 2, but it was just him and Beth. They're kind of sitting outside somewhere, and she just asks if everything's okay, and he turns to her with one black eye. Still like fly-ish, and he's like, everything's fine, and they focus on flies on a plate of nachos.
Not the nachos.
So I'm glad they went with the more comeuppance ending.
Yeah.
There's also a deleted scene, which is worth finding and watching, because it's actually hilarious. I'm glad they cut it, where him and Beth, they stop by at a restaurant, and he's in the back seat of the car, and she's ordering food, and these kids are like making fun of him, like, you look weird. So he like rolls down the window and pukes, but it's done from a side camera angle. It's done from a side camera angle where you could tell there's a hose by his mouth, and it like splatters all over the windshield. Yeah. So there's a good reason why that was deleted.
I've got another one. There was a screening for us on the crew at a theater, but there's a screening room somewhere. It was kind of cool. It wasn't a real theater, and it was like a almost finished rough cut, but they had put in a shot that was just too extreme to put in. It was so unbelievable. It would have kind of taken you out of the film. But there's a scene where they've got there. It's at the finale, and there's a elevator, and it's this like cage-like elevator, coming down, and a guard gets caught underneath it so that when it comes down, it crushes his head. Now, they had built a skull of this guy, I think with a silicone or gelatin head or something, but it had a wax skull, and then had I think an alginate head, a brain inside of it, or, but some kind of material like that. And, and then they glopped it with blood and everything. And so that the machine would come down and actually crush this dummy. And what happened in the take that they showed was it popped the wax skull and shot the brain across the floor. The camera angle was open up to that space, so it was like just the perfect, start and stop of it. But like there's this whole brain, and it just was like too much.
I was gonna say that scene was pretty extreme in the theatrical version. So, yeah.
I just like the idea of the flying brain just whap.
It would have been interesting to see. It really would have.
Yeah, that reminds me of another movie where some guy's head got squeezed and the brain like flies across the.
Just a brain whistle.
Maybe it was good they didn't use it. It would have been too much slapstick or splatstick for seriousness.
Well, yeah, the image that I get in my head with the brain flying, it would be like an Evil Dead 2 when the eyeball got popped out.
Yeah.
Just that same sideways shot. Like that's the image that I get in my head.
No, he was thinking of an Evil Dead 2 when Henrietta gets her head stomped on, the eyeball pops out, and then the yeah.
Across the room goes into Bobby Joe's mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nope.
Hilarious.
Some random trivia on The Fly 2. Keanu Reeves was offered to play Martin, but turned it down. Speaking of the effects works on this film, the telepods in the film, Cronenberg left them in his backyard. So when the sequel came around, they tried to use them, but I guess they were just like were all falling apart and destroyed. So they had to rebuild them from scratch.
Wow. Vincent D'Onofrio also auditioned for the part of Martin.
Oh, interesting.
I'm sorry, who did?
Vincent D'Onofrio.
Really?
Yeah. Fresh out of Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah, I know. That's what's got me thinking. Private Pile. I could see him doing it because he was a talented enough actor. I mean, Eric Stoltz definitely fit the role because he's a really good method actor. You know, sometimes that's to his detriment because we all know the Back to the Future story by now.
Yeah, he was so method in Fly 2. He wanted people to call him by his character's name, and they even put his character's name on his chair.
Well, method is becoming another lost art.
Yeah, supposedly in the intro of the film, the green flashes of light between each credit was actually recycled or borrowed from alternate unused title sequence of the first movie. They did want to do another videotape of Seth Brundle, but they couldn't get Jeff Goldblum because that would have required him to go in the makeup chair, and so they just decided not to do that. They wanted Mel Brooks to cameo in Fly 2, but he was like, no.
He likes his comedy.
And that would be kind of weird. It'd be almost like a Hitchcock kind of thing.
Oh, Josh Brolin was another actor that I was looking for Martin.
I had no idea. Yeah, they had a lot of good actors going up for that role.
It's kind of sad that Fly 2 is as obscure as it is today because it's actually really well worth watching. It's surprisingly good. You know, most horror sequels are terrible. That's one of the things where, like, I've said it before in other podcasts, but horror movies generally are stuck with an idea, and you just can't get multiple movies out of it. This is one of the few movies that could actually that was actually able to find that same magic a second time. Because, like, you think about The Fly, it's such a simple concept. It's guy turns into a fly. It's like, how are you going to make a sequel to that?
I believe when this was originally released, I think it did get trashed on a bit.
It definitely did not receive good reviews, but then again, who really cares?
Right.
The way that reviews go, especially back then, I don't take much stock into them because the original Vacation movie was hated by critics. And that's one of the funniest movies I've ever seen in my life.
How did Fangoria react to Fly 2?
I'm not sure. I had to look that up.
Fangoria, I think, also kind of... I think Fangoria also wasn't too kind about it. But once again, it was one of those movies, and that's the other thing that I hate about reviews is like if you go on IMDb, it's one of those things where anybody can just put a number in, and then they take the other reviews, and then people look at that number, and they're like, oh, well, it's got 5 or it's got a 4, and that's not worth watching. And you know, people just need to watch a movie and not look at the number and make their own decision about it. The Fly 2 got low ratings. I remember that. But it was a really, really good sequel, especially considering what it was following.
Sure. But it has that kind of built-in thing, or, oh, there's going to be a sequel to The Fly. Well, who's directing? Not Cronenberg. And then you go, well, then it's going to be a whole different thing. And it definitely has a different tone to it. But it goes really dark, like Cronenberg's film. And it feels, you know, has a lot of that same rabbit hole of what's happening, where's this thing going kind of thing.
I think Fly 2 is darker than the first movie because it's just like he's a kid, he's rapidly aging, he's a genius, but like they're spying on him and they're all like jerks to him, and you know, it's just like.
According to what I found on Internet Archive, Fangoria issue 1989 says Fly 2 sprouts dregs, whatever that's supposed to mean.
The hell with them. They have no idea what Fangoria was kind of going down at that point, to be honest with you.
What else do they say?
Is that they thought the plot was flat, and I'm not really sure why they're saying that. And they actually complained that it was too slime-ridden, and it was just what I'm getting from here is it's too gross, evidently.
Yeah, sure, whatever.
I mean, they're saying it's not tightly scripted. They're saying it's not as well directed, which I have to disagree with. And from what the articles show, is they're saying the movie was too effects heavy and there wasn't a script, which is just an outright lie. So yeah, that's why you don't believe every review that you see, because I think whoever wrote that article likely never even saw the movie. So
talk about a different time, complaining that there's too many effects.
Yeah, see what I'm saying? You don't buy into that junk.
I know, because Fly 2 came out in the tail end of the 80s. I believe Total Recall was the last movie to use, like, pretty much complete traditional effects. Because in around up to that time, Terminator 2, well, before that, The Abyss came to the scene, and that's when they started really pushing CG for effects.
The Last Starfighter?
Oh, right, yeah.
That's like 83 or 4. But, you know, that I've got the Blu-ray of that, and it's amazing how video game the effects of the spaceship stuff looks in that.
Yeah, that was like the best graphics you could get out of a video game until probably the last couple of years for what they play with video games nowadays. The best endorsement that I had for The Fly 2 was that it was directed by Chris Wallace, who was a really good special effects artist, and he's a pretty competent director. Chris Wallace, I believe he did. Did he work with you in the effects department for The Fly 2?
Well, it was kind of interesting because when I first arrived at CWI, there were about, I don't know, 7 or 8 of us, and we're all sitting around with our little work benches sculpting these fly maquettes of what Martin might transform into. They're all very different. And so we all came up with like 2 or 3 of these things each. And then they laid them all out, and of course, Chris came in and decided to do the one he designed.
Yeah.
So
I guess he felt he had seniority because he worked with the original. And I mean, you know, if anything, that was a good endorsement right there for Chris Wallace, is that he did.
Film.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, but it did come out pretty good, I think. But I do know that I'm sorry.
It's like a fly. That's what I liked. You know, it had multiple arms and was really turning more into like a fly, as though that was going to be the dominant thing.
Yeah. See, I remember he did work on, I know he did work on Return of the Jedi. I know he did work on Gremlins. He did work on the original Fly, not the Vincent Price one, but the Cronenberg one. He did Arachnophobia. I know he did some work on a couple Tales from the Crypt episodes as well, and I think he also worked on Scanners too.
Yeah,
he also did the melting face scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark. So I mean, if there's going to be special effects work done, you know, he definitely knows his job. I know he worked on The Switch, which was the Arnold Schwarzenegger episode. So he worked under Schwarzenegger because he directed that episode, and the effects on that episode were really good. You know, so to me that was a good enough endorsement, because just knowing, you know, like I said, I'm a big FX fan. So knowing what he had done in the past and how good of work he had done, you just know that when someone does work like that, they're not going to just give out like a subpar quality film.
And not only that, he was a really good boss, really agreeable. You know, no authoritarian issues or anything like that. It was a good creative atmosphere. It had a collegiate feel to it. I mean, for me, going from Evil Dead, where I'm kind of pulling the stuff out of hardwares in my kitchen sink, to then I worked on Evil Dead 2, where I'm getting experience with, you know, the K&B guys and Mark Shostrom. This is before they were K&B, but Kurt Spinicatero and Berger. But they were there, you know, so I'm upping my game. We're trying to keep up with these guys, and they're amazing. Holy crap. Nothing but admiration for their work and where they've gone. Holy cow. But then when I moved out to San Francisco with Penny, we I finally got that job, and then that's like the college level where, here's I'm working with everybody who's worked on a number of films, and went on to work on a number of cool films. And I like IMDb Howie Weed, amazing stuff. And I met him really even before this stuff. It was after Evil Dead, but before Evil Dead 2, when we moved to San Francisco, I heard about a film being made, the something Disciples of Dracula or something. Low budget film being made, but applied for the crew and had my Evil Dead. I could tell them I worked on Evil Dead, but I didn't have anything to show for it, other than because it hadn't released yet. And I met Howie there. We kind of rigged some special effects and tried some tests. I think of a melting Dracula head or something, and I made it out of butter, or I can't remember what it was. But then later on, I find out he's working at ILM, and met him again at CWI, and but he's now like a digital animator. Worked on Phantom Menace and I think all of them, and he's just amazing. Anyway, that's me name dropping.
Have you done many interviews on the fly too at all?
No, this is my very first.
Obviously, you're asked about Evil Dead a lot and stuff. And I don't think anyone's really asked your work on the fly too. So
I feel it should be talked about because it was a really good movie, and it's definitely an underrated one and an underappreciated one at that.
Right.
Yeah, and boy, it was like I said, a really learning experience. I was one of the sculptors on the full-size Fly 2 creature, and had 4 arms and 2 legs. I sculpted the 2 legs it stands on, and I did about 80% of the head of the thing. And Kelly, one of the mechanical engineers, devised the mechanics. What we did was you sculpt the creature, then you make castings of that, and then they fill that with a layer that's going to be the thickness of the skin, and devise where the shape of the skull or the understructure is going to be and where the movable points can be. And it seemed I had sculpted in some weird little things so that when Kelly had the eye blinking mechanism, when the eye went up, it caused the eyebrow to do a little interesting twitch, which was brought to my attention because it looked like one of those unexpected happy accidents and that kind of thing. But the mechanics that they had with all the cables, oh, wow. I mean, this was quite a device. Because they had several versions of the fly creature. One they had a little person who would be in the legs, and then he was suspended on a carriage that could be pushed. Had a counterweight and everything. So when they were doing shots of the thing walking down a hallway, he's suspended and you're just shooting him from the legs down. And then they had top views where somebody large would wear the top part, and there'd be cables coming out of his back, and people could operate the forearms, those kind of things. And but have them made from front, so you could shoot from the front, so you could shoot them from the back, and then had the various ones to be stunt things, and one was a springy thing, so it could actually do a leap, because you couldn't put a suit on a person and do that. Yeah. But back it was just an encyclopedia of how to do practical effects back then. And then of course they did all those amazing the fly creature would assault a couple of the security guards and do the stomach acid vomit onto them, right. And their faces start eating away. And that's really effective stuff. It looked like it hurt.
Yeah,
it did.
Is there any photos of the original fly design?
Not for me. We all signed, like non-disclosure kind of things, and can't photos, and which is one of the shames of working, in a crew like that, because you get to do all stuff, but how do you, you can show somebody the move. Well, I did that as it moves across the screen or something, and I kind of preferred illustration where I get to keep my artwork and, I have something to show for it.
Mm-hmm.
That, and actually own the property, that kind of thing.
Right. You'd think for the DVD or Blu-ray or something, they would include concept art that they didn't use.
Yeah, that'd be. I'd love to see that. I think there is one. I think I've got it. I was looking for it earlier, couldn't find it. But I think I've got a version of the Fly 2 that had some special features. Boy, but also Howie did shoot just interviewing the cast and everything and showing little bits of the film production, or of the, at least the construction of the sets and things. And that's what I might be thinking of. But
so I guess we'll wrap up the Fly 2. Do you have any other interesting behind the scenes or stories on the Fly 2?
I got just to work with this amazing group of people. Buzz Nedig and Howie Weed and I were the sculptors, but there were a lot of people pitching in. John Berg did some, and they had these amazing mechanical engineers: Kelly Lepkowski, Guy Hudson, Mark Rappaport worked on. Was a mechanical engineer. He also worked on Killer Clowns and lots of things. I think he's still working on it. I also worked on the first Tremors film. Don Bees, really talented guy, and also worked at ILM and got a couple of us approval to go over and visit the ILM warehouse where they had all these props, the Ark of the Covenant and the Death Star and lots of maquettes, guns, and oh my gosh, it was just amazing. And then
I would have been so jealous. I'd love to see that.
All the footage from Star Wars. What's that?
I just said me too. I'd like to have seen the Death Star.
Oh boy, yeah. And later, at another time, I got a tour of ILM. I had some Japanese visitors. It was the owner of Kyoto Productions. They make, in Japan, it's a garage kit, model kit company. And model kits are different over there because they're solid. And you get the whole arm and the whole leg, and then you can actually shape it with your tools so you can position it the way you want. But it's monsters and dinosaurs and everything. And my wife and I had been invited over to Japan in 1985, and we got to tour his factory there and meet all these amazing artists who were sculpting these astounding dinosaurs and monster things, Godzilla, all this stuff. All licensed. And they're top. They're actually one of the top companies of that. And so later, I got contacted, and if we could meet them, they were coming to San Francisco, and they wanted me to kind of escort them to ILM. So we got to visit ILM, and this is at a time when they were doing the Star Tours effects. Oh, and also young Sherlock Holmes. And we got to see the Death Star from Return of the Jedi, the unfinished Death Star where they're still assembling it.
Yeah,
and,
that's one too.
And have you seen Star Tours? You ever been to Disney World or?
Yes, I remember that.
But they go through these star crystals, and they were photographing them against the green screen with the motion cameras, set up on the tracks and everything, so they could repeat movements with different lighting effects and all that. And I remember a really cool map painting from Enemy Mine, Lou Gossett and Dennis Quaid. Also makeup stuff done by Chris Wallace Industries. But that was just amazing. I saw Dennis Murin, and it was got toured the place. It was just amazing. What time?
Yeah, that's stuff that never leaves you. And I mean, seeing the miniatures and stuff like that. I mean, like I said, I love that stuff, and I already mentioned, I grew up on watching claymation movies and miniatures, and it's really so cool watching that. Like if I, excuse me, if I see a movie that has any type of behind the scenes footage where they show building the models and all that, I eat it up and I watch it over and over again, taking it in. It's just so cool to me, and it's a lost art. It's a shame that they, you know, think that CGI is the way to go. This is tangible, and it's just.
But the way I see it, they can coexist. But like right now, there's all these cartoon animators from from Disney Studios and other places, and nobody's making those movies. So this art, the complexity of it, is going to be lost because so much of it is beyond putting into a book, or a series of videos. There's so much acting going into these drawings and making that connection, and that's workshop kind of stuff, And it's just a shame that's being lost. Now, there is a follow through with digital animation, when you're doing the Pixar kind of things, but still, it's cartoons, it's drawings come alive, and it'd just be a shame to lose that. And the world's big enough to support those kind of films.
Wholeheartedly agree with you.
They worked in the past, they'll work again.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there is a place for CGI in the world. I don't hate it. I love it when I see it. But it's the fact that people think that it's just they are forgetting about the past. And there's an old saying, there's no school like the old school, and there's a reason why. Disney was on top of the animation world with the way that they would do just the layers of the artwork, and just it was fascinating enough just to think about how much work went into it, and blending them together, it doesn't work. And I mean, like over the years, like as a child, I grew up, on Disney, and I grew up on, Looney Tunes cartoons, and now I'm a father of two, and my daughters, the cartoons that they watch, they don't put nearly enough work into it, or make it as detailed, or looking as nice, or as colorful, or as vivid, or have depth to it, the way that the original stuff did, and they're using CGI, which is supposed to be better than the stuff that we were watching when we were children.
There's that stuff, that had that Chuck Jones energy and, this liveliness. And it's more like stand-up routines now with Rennie and Stimpy just lines back and forth. But then again, I'm not watching all that much of that. But yeah, I'm with you with the classics. It's just a shame that kids can't, that they need to get exposed to the old stuff as well. Because it's a riot. I mean, Bugs Bunny, give me who doesn't love him?
Oh yeah, believe me, I fought tooth and nail to get my kids to watch Looney Tunes, and they still enjoy it today. They my oldest daughter, she loves the artwork that's in it. My youngest, she still loves the comedy behind it. We still watch the old VHS tapes that I had, and I think they definitely appreciate it, because I'd hate to see this stuff just waste away. And you brought it up perfectly. Ren and Stimpy, that was funny when I was 12 years old, but now that I'm 34 years old, I can just watch it and be like, okay. Meanwhile, I can still watch Bugs Bunny have an argument with Elmer Fudd and laugh about it, and it's not the nostalgia talking.
You can watch Ren and Stimpy today and be like, how the hell did the censors get away with that?
Yeah.
The edgy 90s.
So, yeah, I mean, let's say whoever's listening to this, if you haven't seen The Fly 2, you should check it out. It's not just some cornball, cheeseball copy of the first movie. It's very unique. It goes its own direction, and it continues the story of the first movie, and so, yeah, check it out. Anyone else got any comments?
I'd say the same thing. Definitely check it out. It's, like I said, it's underrated, and it's also underappreciated, excuse me. And I mean, really, the one thing that I took away from watching The Fly 2 again was that you really didn't see, once again, a whole lot of movies that were remakes, and they actually went on to make a sequel, and a good sequel at that. This pretty much knocked it out of the park.
Oh, as a last comment, this has been a lot of fun. I really thanks for inviting me into this discussion. It's a lot of fun. If you guys ever want to talk Harryhausen films or Willis O'Brien stuff, I know tons about these guys, and I'd be your man. I can tell
I
you a
love
story.
that. We're you know what? We got to do a thing of Jason and the Argonauts maybe someday, and then
Oh, there you go.
we could definitely bring you back for that. Jason and the Argonauts is awesome. I love the work on Medusa's head. Just that stuff I love. It's fantastic.
I got to second that.
Lots. What are your closing?
My closing thought is this movie is a lot better than the title would lead you to believe. He's like, oh, Fly 2, that's got to be like some made for DVD, made for VHS piece of crap. It's a legitimate movie, and it's well worth watching.
I agree.
And special thanks to our guest, Tom Sullivan. You were awesome, and
Yeah, we'll definitely have to have you back. We'll do something like a Jason and the Argonauts or something Harryhausen. We got to do that. He was a master ahead of his time. But thank you so much, sir, for coming in and speaking with us today. You did a wonderful job on this. You really, truly did. And it was really great talking to you, especially about, well, we got to talk about the old stuff. I can't wait. And I'm going to be honest with you. You did the stop motion on Evil Dead. You scared the hell out of me as a kid. Thank you very much.
I appreciate that. That's what we were trying to do.
There we go. We can get him back and we can talk about, the Evil Dead. I don't think anyone's ever asked Tom about the Evil Dead before.
What's Evil Dead? Is that like that TV show?
Yeah, something groovy, I suppose.
Yeah, some guy with a chin.
The first time that I saw Evil Dead, I was a kid, and when those arms popped out of the bodies, that scared the crap out of me. Like that was one of those and I got up and I ran out of the room type of things. I was like 5 years old.
Perfect. How old were you?
I was about 5 at the time.
There was a kid in the 80s who was 8 years old and saw Evil Dead. It took 15 years of intensive therapy in a soundproof room just to get him to stop screaming.
Oh, what? That's pretty bad.
You should have had to put it on the box.
I saw that. I saw Evil Dead 2. My wife and I saw it in San Francisco, and we were living there at the time. And the guys in the row in front of us, when that happened, they all leapt to their feet. There's something about Sam's films where there's involuntary crowd movement, where it just makes you just get up and scream. Right. Remember, I'd go down to Market Street to look at all these great grindhouse theaters when Evil Dead was playing, and even in the afternoon, it's like packing houses. And people are yelling at, no, Ash, idiot, don't go in the door, you...
You idiot, don't go in there. But then again, Ash was always an idiot, though. That was his
What
thing.
other movies do people yell at the screen like that? It was just amazing. I hadn't run across that. I mean,
only horror movies. Only horror movies have I ever seen movies where people actually sit. No, don't go in there. What the hell's wrong with you? Why are you doing that? No. Oh, so stupid. Going up the stairs. And then eventually they started taking the cliche. And it was like, well, let's show the audience what happens if they don't go up the stairs, and they wind up getting killed faster. That's what I love so much about horror movies, is that it does listen to the audience like that, and then it invokes that response out of people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here I'll share this one. I was about that. I was about that age. I was 8 years old when I saw the Amityville Horror, and everybody can laugh about this one now. But when I looked at that scene when Margot Kidder looks out the window and the red eyes stared back at her, I couldn't look out dark windows at night until I was 18.
Nor should you.
And then I watch it as I'm an adult, and I'm just like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life.
When I was a kid, I was like 10 years old. And I had my sister Kathy was a year older, and my brother Mike's a year younger. And our parents were out for a party or something. We're going to be back till 1. And we talked the babysitter into letting us watch The House on Haunted Hill, the Vincent Price thing.
Oh, no.
And we made it until that little witch slides out on a skateboard, And that freaked us out. That's enough. We turned off the TV, went to bed. Tried to sleep.
Yeah, we're dead.
And of course, you look at it today, and it's, oh my God, it's so hokey. But it's so weird how these films affect you. So you a little kid seeing something like, oh my God,
I know. They had the amazing effect, and they stick with you. That's why I love horror. You know?
Yeah.
But once again, I really appreciate you sitting down and chatting with us today. Thank you so much. It was wonderful talking with you. All right, everybody have a good night now.
All right, see you.
All right.
Yeah. So, yeah. Thanks. This is awesome.
Yeah, it was absolutely excellent.
I think we kept that moving and entertaining and lots of fun. You had a good crowd there.
Awesome. Well, that's the flight too.
And all the girls say I'm pretty fly for a white guy.